I saw a movie on the suffragettes. They had a really hard time to get government to even think. The fact that they were dropping dead in the factories or couldn't raise their own children or had their children take them off them, they went through hell. And before that even, I found a quote that said, they estimate in Europe in the Middle Ages, when men didn't like the women, they burned 4 million women as witches. And that's not the ones they garroted, raped, hanged and drowned. This masculine and feminine balance has been out of whack for centuries. There's a lot to be healed and rebalanced. And as I look at history, and this isn't a comprehensive look, men have always gone to war. In fact, the Vikings so loved war, they thought heaven was, as soon as they died, they would go to Valhalla and they get to fight and die every single day. And then they'd have a great meal in the evenings. They thought that's what heaven was, Valhalla. So they had this, and they used to eat mushrooms so they could go insane, so they didn't care about charging into battle. But the women were left to tend to the wounds and to deal with what was left after the battles on this level, on the earthly level. And it's been like this for a long time, you know. And then in the Middle Ages we had chivalry. We had where men got the idea they could be respectful and they could be warriors and they could be serving the good of the country, the good of the court. And there was more of I think, a balance. And it came from Rome, apparently. It was a Christian idea, Christian ethic of this respect for women, respect for the society you work for. You served. You had meaning and purpose because you served the common good. And the Maoris, the New Zealand Maoris, they were formidable fighters. The Maoris are very masculine male warriors, but after they've been in battle, they come back to these hot springs and they sit in these hot springs after that fury and insanity of war, and the women come around and sing to them. The feminine part of the community comes in and helps to rebalance the men so the men can come back into the community as men and not as full-blown warriors. You have this union. And then comes what they call economic rationalism. Maybe you agree with it. For me, it's economy with reason, but if you leave out the heart, you can get into real trouble. Oh, that makes a lot of sense. Sure it does, but does it feel right? Yeah, but you can get men to work for $8 an hour and then you'll make more profit. Yeah, that's a good idea. What does it do to the men who are working for $8 an hour? So this economic rationalism is all thinking, and it's thinking that benefits some people maybe and not others. I don't want to get too political, but for me the main thing is the heart and the mind can get disconnected. And if you lose your heart, you've only got this thing that can be logical and rational and, you know, and that's perfect for when you want to build something. But if you want a more holistic experience of life or a healthier community or a happier community, you need both. So we go from the crib to the cage if we're not careful. And we end up where we started from. Working for without meaning, without purpose, and for not enough money. And that's why I'm coming out in the world to sort of speak about what I think, and you might disagree with me, and I'd love to hear that later on if you do. Because I'm just trying to find the truth. I'm not trying to push any dogma or anything. And nowadays we've got this toxic masculinities getting banded around a lot. I know there are some men who are, I wouldn't call it toxic, but maybe they're hurting. Maybe they're hurting inside so much they don't know what to do with it except for lash out and try and lessen that by hurting others as well. And they say that, you know, often it gets passed on. If you were traumatised as a child, you'll pass that on. That tendency to sort of try and get it out of your system and do it to someone else, and they spend their whole lives pulling that back and working with that wound, you know, and how to find their own wholeness, I guess, their own strength. In his fear of living, he also cannot participate in the joy and pleasure that other people experience in their lived lives. If he's withholding from others and not sharing what he knows, he eventually feels isolated and lonely. And this is what a lot of men do, I think. They hold it inside. I often think if I say to a man, what are you thinking? He's like, why do you want to know? I says, well, because there's just the two of us here and I've got an active mind. I'd like to know what you're thinking, you know. If I ask him what he's feeling, I'd be lucky to see him for another year. So I've learnt not to do that very often, unless it's with a close friend. But what you're feeling is a big part of you. You know, what you're thinking is a big part of you. And the mind has enough trouble on its own without holding stuff inside. There's enough to deal with this mind that's so active all the time, sort of. And I don't know what goes in your mind, but it could be, oh, you're no good, or you'll never succeed, or what's the point? It could be anything. Some negative thought, oh, you'll never be as good as your father, you'll never be as good as your brother. There's millions of them in there, these little thoughts. And if you don't work out how to deal with them, they can bring you down and crush you. So, and a balance to this toxic masculinity, there's a lovely quote from the rescue team, Fire and Rescue in New South Wales. House fires are toxic. Our masculinity isn't. I guess the toxic is about the ones who are violent. And how do we help them to learn to not be violent, to learn what's causing them to be violent, you know, without breaking them further? How do we support each other to rise up into our strength, our inner strength? You know, the fact that you've had so many experiences is a strength that you can help others with. I found a quote by a woman who lived in Kiev, and she said, in the Second World War, when the Germans came, if our men did not have aggression in them, Moscow would now be German. The men from Kiev went off to war, not one of them came back, but they protected their country. And if they didn't have that aggression or that masculine energy, it was all gone. All gone. So I'll give you a little break and just show you some nice pictures, I think. So we're all born to a woman. If you're lucky, you got to play in mud when you're a kid. Had some dreams, some fantasies. That sense of adventure that men seem to have. The initial hint of romance when you fall in love. And psychologically, when we're growing up, we give ourselves away. You know, you've got to be cute and cuddly or quiet, or you've got to be whatever the adults want you to be, or you don't get the affection, or you don't get the attention, or you don't get the job you want. Or our whole first half of life is giving away who you are in truth to make sure you fit in. And the psychologists talk about the midlife crisis. It's when this thing happens within. The Jungian psychologists say it's this, when a man gets to about midlife, he's created himself. He's set up himself. He's got his job. He's got his way of earning a living. He's done all those masculine things. But about halfway through life, this thing happens where the opposite, this inner part of you, which isn't all male-driven, it's more feminine, more like the feminine qualities, like being receptive, being sensitive, feeling kindness, wanting to reflect on life a bit more. But a lot of men can't cope with it. In general, men can't cope with this midlife thing that goes on where this more reflective, feminine, inner thing starts to open up. And they just grab for when they were 17 or 18 and go and buy a new sports car or another motorbike or get a bigger job with more money. And they're trying to deal with these feelings that come up in midlife rather than, oh, what's going on there? Like, see it as an adventure. What's going on inside me? So there's this balancing that needs to occur, this new growth, this new way of being. And I was thinking this morning, the older I get, the more willing I am to surrender to that, to allow life to unfold instead of to drive forward to some goal that might have been my dad's goal. And I'm thinking, well, why am I doing it? Is it something in my heart, or is it something I've picked up from him and I'm trying to fulfill his dreams? It's an important thing, I guess, in a way that we find our truth. And then another thing they suggest is that a man must find his masculinity. He must move from that psychology which is more of a boy to a psychology which is more of a man, whatever that means for you. Yeah? There's this beautiful image of this sculptor, this Icelandic sculptor. He made these enormous statues of warriors. They're all over Iceland. They're beautiful. This is what I call spiritual life. We've got our history, our psychology's given us problems, and then we have this spiritual life, and for me, spirituality means just recognising the fact that we're more than a body, more than a mind, more than some feelings. We're more than that. There's something else in us, which I call spirit or spirituality. Ego strives but never arrives, but spirit is peace. So we do have this peace in us. And you might find it sitting by a river, fishing, doing some wood carving, I don't know, but there is that peace. And getting older, maybe you found it. Sooner or later I know my body's going to give out, so I try not to cling to the body. All right, it's going to give out. It could be 20 years, it could be 5 years, I don't know. Some of my friends are dropping dead lately and they're only in their 50s and 60s, and okay, that's life, isn't it? The unexpected, you don't know what's coming. So finding this sense of what it really is peaceful for you and meaningful for you. So I think spirituality for me is like to choose, to face, to feel and grow. Be truthful to who I am. I said to someone the other day, like, I'm of an age now and I've been through a lot. If someone else gets upset, that's their problem. I don't deliberately go out to upset them. But if they get upset, I can only hope that they find some peace some other way. I don't deliberately say anything that'll upset people, but I imagine sometimes I will, because I usually just speak my mind and speak my heart. So. And then healing. And they say the poets and the comedians often have a very deep suffering within them that they somehow balance by just telling jokes and keeping everything going. This is the founder of Aikido. Aikido is no attack. It's only defence. He was a master of 5 or 6 martial arts. And he was training, he used to train every day, 8-10 hours a day, underwater falls with a sword. And he said one day this golden light come up out of the earth, and he knew the essence of martial art is love. And this is one of the greatest martial arts I've ever done. This practice of you never attack. Someone else's force against you, make sure you get out of the way of it. Don't try and match it. Get out of the way of it, spiral round. They will defeat themselves. You've just got to maintain your peace. So this is the inner warrior, the beautiful image of men rescuing people and soldiers. There's a positive and negative to everything. So we're looking at letting in these ancient energies, qualities, archetypes they're called. So the warrior is one of them. This man who stood in front of the tanks in Tiananmen Square, a peaceful warrior. Martin Luther King, he was a warrior of ideas. He put ideas out into the world. So there must be a king. There must be that part of yourself that has the benevolence and the care and the concern for everyone else you can help. The warrior is similar, the positive aspect of the warrior, to protect, to nurture. The king archetype, that kingly aspect of yourself that can plan, that can look after yourself and others. And then we have the magician, the person who understands more. And in each case, whatever you've got, the best thing you can do is share it. Give it to the benefit of others. So the magician shares his knowledge, the medicine man, the Indigenous elder. They're sharing. And then we have the last of the main archetypes called the lover. To allow yourself to feel the beauty of life. I've spent a lot of my life feeling the deepest of grief and pain and suffering at loss of love. And it was only about 3 years ago I went, well, if I don't find the courage to go again, the last bit of my life, what's it worth? So what works for me is, well, I guess I've opened to love. That's definitely one. I've been willing to let love into my life again, no matter what it costs me, and in a balanced way, of course. And I run these men's groups where I find enormous benefit. And what I do, it's really basic. We sit in a circle. I just ask the question, what's most important to you today? What's most important to you right now? We practice being present. If you're vulnerable, if you're feeling afraid, a couple of the guys will come and they say, I did not want to come tonight. I just felt I did not want to come, and yet they came. They went through the fear of, and then they got to let it go. Instead of staying at home and hanging on to it and it maybe doing them harm, they came. They faced their fears. They came and they'd just be present. And I put no pressure on any of them. No one has to talk, or you can talk if you like. We talk about any topic whatsoever that comes up. It's just an open, honest conversation about any topic that comes up. And the first guy might talk about his father. That might start a chain reaction, but at no stage do you have to then be part of that conversation. When it comes to your turn, you talk about anything you want, or we speak from our heart, we listen from our heart, and we're spontaneous. If something just comes up and you go, actually, can I just talk about this? Of course you can, go for it. So in a way, I think we learn to care, to communicate and to feel. And it's a mix of focus and relaxation. I've learned, we meet for 2.5 hours. I call the men to order within the first 5 minutes. We relax. We do about an hour of focused being together and sharing. And then we take a break and everyone's, oh, great. And then they talk about anything they want with whoever they want. And then for the last 20 or 30 minutes, we go again and just see how the evening finishes. It's a safe and supportive group environment. You can sit in a circle and be with men. Find out what being a man is, or what being with other men is. So my final point is, peace and fulfillment is possible. That's my talk. I really thank you for your attention. I hope it's of value to you.